T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris is shit sick.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris is shit sick.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. Glad that you guys are joining me on this wonderful Monday afternoon. NFL training camp is in full swing, and that means that the NFL season or football season is back in full effect, and we got a really good episode today. I'm going to be giving you guys my official NFL record predictions plus my Super Bowl picks for the 2024-2025 season. But before we get into that, later on in the show, I want to hit on a few topics. I want to double back on the Brandon Aiyuk situation with the 49ers. I think they need to either extend him or trade him. They can't keep this brother this season. Jalen Hurts, is he overrated? This has been a very hot conversation all this offseason. Everybody's been discussing how good is Jalen Hurts. Is he actually an elite quarterback, or is he only a one-hit wonder? We now have an update when it comes to FSU and Clemson's future in the SEC. I'm going to be giving you guys my rookie expectations for Caleb Williams. I watched Hard Knocks featuring the New York Giants. It was the offseason version of Hard Knocks, and I'm going to just say this. They should never allow a bad organization to ever be featured on this offseason version of Hard Knocks, because the Giants made themselves look like flaming idiots on this thing. How good is Oklahoma going to be this season? If you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we aren't just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones in audio format, wherever you get your podcasts from, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. If you enjoy the content and you want to support us, give us a 5-star review. We will greatly appreciate it. Follow us on X at JT__. If you're listening there, like, retweet the stream, follow if you're new, like and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we upload new content. And before we dive into it all, here's a quick word from our partner. In football, we all know that no quarterback can win without good protection up front. It's also important that you protect yourself from data brokers who sell your personal information online to scammers, spammers, and anybody else who may want to target you. That's why you should use Aura, today's sponsor of this episode. Aura shows which data brokers are passing away your information on the internet and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf. Go to aura.com/JTsports in description or pin comment down below to get a 14-day free trial and protect your personal information from being exposed online. Cleaning up your information online not only helps reduce the amount of spam you receive, but it also protects you from hackers who could use this info to help gain access into your social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Go to our sponsor, aura.com/JTsports in description or pin comment down below to gain access to your 14-day free trial and protect yourself from hackers looking to gain access into your sensitive information online. All right, I want to double back on this Brandon Aiyuk situation. To me, the 49ers have either one or two choices. Either they trade him or they extend this brother before the season begins. You cannot keep Brandon Aiyuk around without a new contract. I've been going back and forth with a lot of 49ers fans on social media because they keep saying that San Francisco has all the leverage in this situation because Brandon Aiyuk still has 1 year left on his deal. And if he were to sit out this season, the 49ers would still hold his rights for next year. So he can't become a free agent until he plays this one last year for San Francisco. And then let's say he has another good season. In the offseason, the 49ers could still keep him around if they place the franchise tag on him. But I don't view that as leverage. I just see that as you holding a disgruntled player hostage. And the problem with keeping a guy like Brandon Aiyuk around that obviously wants to get paid is that he's going to do whatever it takes to get his way. You see, what you fans fail to understand is that we have an entirely new generation of players in the league. A decade or two ago, if a guy didn't get their way when it came to contract negotiations, they went and they played. They didn't make it a theatrical situation. They didn't make it a drama-filled spectacle. It just, negotiations fell through. Neither side could come to an agreement. So the player would go on the field and show their worth. Nowadays, though, with these new kinds of players in the league, they don't care about if they have 1 year left on their contract. Either you pay them what they want or they're going to demand a trade and they're going to do whatever it takes in their power to get their way. A guy like Brandon Aiyuk is just not simply going to shut up and play. You already seen how he's gone about this situation. He's been making TikTok videos, FaceTiming Jalen Daniels, saying how the 49ers don't want him. And he's gone about this situation as a true diva. And I don't consider a player a diva all because they choose to sit out of minicamp and training camp because they want to get paid. That's not being a diva. That's just being smart. If you want to get a new deal, you're not going to risk injuring yourself in practice and lowering what you could get from your team because of an injury. But in Brandon Aiyuk's case, he definitely has been a drama queen about this because he's done a lot of theatrics about this situation. And the problem with keeping Brandon Aiyuk around is that although he is a really good player, it's going to be hard to win a Super Bowl with him this year if he doesn't get paid, because his contract situation is going to be a storyline that everybody in the media locks on to, and they're going to always ask him about it. And of course, with him wanting his way, he's going to take every opportunity to use that to take shots at the 49ers and to voice his displeasure, which is going to further divide this locker room. Because when they asked Brandon Aiyuk about his contract situation and his response to that, of course they're going to ask other players how they feel about his contract situation also. And you're going to have players that either side with Brandon Aiyuk and say, man, that brother deserves everything that he's asking for. And then you're going to have other 49ers players who say, man, he's going about this the wrong way. He needs to put the team first. And then you're going to have the guys who are going to be neutral, who just are going to say, it ain't my business. I have no dog in this fight. Remember the Le'Veon Bell situation a few years ago when he got franchise tagged, but he wanted a new deal and he ended up holding out that season? Well, before the season started, the Steelers locker room turned on Le'Veon Bell, and it became a really divisive environment. The 49ers are trying to win a Super Bowl this year. To win it all, everybody has to be on the same page. Everybody has to be bought in. Everybody needs to be focused on the common goal. Brandon Aiyuk is not focused on winning the championship. You know what his priorities are right now? Getting his. And you can call him selfish all you want to, but the reality is that the NFL stands for the not for long league. At best, you get 2 max contract extensions if you're a good player. The average lifespan in the NFL is only 4 to 5 years. So if you have the opportunity to get a big contract extension, you want to get as much money as possible. And then if you can get another contract extension, you're going to go about that in the same manner. You see, everybody in the NFL is expendable to a certain extent. With Brandon Aiyuk being so young, having displayed his ability to be a true number 1 wide receiver, he has more leverage in this situation than what 49ers fans are giving him credit for. You see, what you think leverage is that, man, I control your future. But the leverage that Brandon Aiyuk has is that, okay, yes, you control my future, but the longer you continue not to pay me and you don't want to trade me and you want to keep me around, I'm going to come into your facilities and just act like a complete asshole until I get my way. And I'm going to become a cancer and I'm going to become a distraction because you don't want to give me what I want. You see, that's the leverage that Brandon Aiyuk has. You really think the 49ers are going to want to put up for that for a whole entire season? Everybody in the media asking Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, well, what about Brandon Aiyuk's contract situation? Oh, Kyle, did you hear what Brandon Aiyuk said about him not getting paid? Having somebody that is disgruntled as what Brandon Aiyuk is right now isn't good to have a championship environment. It's just divisive, it's a big distraction, and it takes the focus off what the main priority should be, which is winning championships. Another thing is that Brandon Aiyuk also, with how he's going about this, with the theatrics and the drama, he's lowering his trade value. So the more negativity that he brings around this situation, the more his trade value continues to decline. The 49ers could have gotten a 1st or 2nd round pick for this dude if they traded him around the NFL draft. But now, the longer they continue to keep him and the more he continues to speak out negatively about this situation, you could run the risk of only getting back a 4th or 5th rounder for him in return. And yes, you can franchise tag him, but what sense does that make when if you put him on the tag, he's going to have a larger cap hit than what he would have if you just would sign him long term, because the cap hit can be maneuvered in a way that you don't have to take a big cap hit all up front. You can spread it out over multiple years. Let's say they agree to a 4-year extension worth, $30 million a year, right? And let's say the cap hit is around $30 million, where they can find a way to space that out. Let's say maybe next season they only take $10 million in cap hit due to that new contract, and then the next year they may take $15 million, but you can spread that out. On the franchise tag though, you don't tag a player just because you want to keep him around for one more year. You only put the franchise tag on somebody who you want to sign to a long-term deal, because that just defeats the purpose of what the tag is for. The tag is to give said team more time to get a long-term deal done, not to keep somebody hostage. And you don't want to keep somebody like Brandon Aiyuk around who's going to cause chaos and drama. These players have showed you guys time in and time out that if they don't get their way, they're willing to do whatever it takes to force their way out. And their agents even suggest them to go about handling things in a childish manner. Contract negotiations aren't pretty all the time. And when you are as good as what the 49ers are, sometimes you can't afford to keep all your great players around. You got to let some dudes walk away, especially when they're going to become a distraction like Brandon Aiyuk is going to become. So the 49ers, it would be in their best interest to either extend him before the season so you don't have to worry about this anymore, or you trade him to another team and let them figure it out. But if you're a fan and you keep thinking that the 49ers have all the leverage because they hold the cards when it comes to his future, you're wrong. Because you really want to keep somebody around that's going to take shots at your team for not giving him what he wants. I don't think that's smart, and that's definitely not the kind of player that you want with the mindset that he has that equates to you winning a championship. So yes, you do have a say in his future, but he is going to go about this in a way that kind of can be seen as unprofessional, and it could hinder the entire team's performance. It could ruin the locker room chemistry that they've done such a great job of building all those years under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. I get where some of you fans are coming from, but you guys underestimate the power that these players kind of have in the new era of the NFL. Same thing with the NBA. These guys are learning from James Harden. You remember all those times that James Harden wanted out and wanted to get traded to a new team, and when he didn't get his way, he would do whatever it takes to be a cancer and to be a distraction to the point where they had no choice but to trade him. These NFL players are learning from what players are doing in the NBA to get their way. You're not going to keep a guy around that doesn't want to be there, and plus, it's going to make him a headache to even want to be around, to even want to coach. You drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round to be a potential replacement for him. So therefore, what's the point of keeping him around? Yeah, he is really good when he's on the field, but if he's going to be a dickhead about not getting paid, I'll tell you adios, amigos, and trade you to the New York Giants or the Las Vegas Raiders and let you play on one of the worst teams in the NFL and see how you like that. I don't think that is smart for the 49ers to keep Brandon Aiyuk around if they don't have any intentions of giving him what he is asking for. And here's a third thing about this situation that gives Brandon Aiyuk a little bit more leverage. Let's say he balls out again. The 49ers missed out on a good opportunity to get him for a discounted price. He's only asking for $30 million. What if he puts up a 1,300-yard season again, or he does more than that? 1,500 yards, then he becomes more expensive and you missed out your chance to get him for less. The 49ers need to either trade Brandon Aiyuk or give him what he's asking for, because he's starting to become too big of a headache to keep around for one last season. Shout out to everybody in the comment section, man. Shout out to my guy, Kate Rome, with the $5 donation. He says, woohoo, stoked for more JT Sports Live. Been looking forward to your predictions. Shout out to my guy, Dubs, the money man. He says, JT, salute fam. My dude, Sean Taylor, he says, gang, gang. Can't believe they still leaving Aiyuk hanging like that. He's got a lot of good years ahead of him and is worth whatever he's asking for. Shout out to everybody on the chat. If you're listening on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications. If you're listening on X, follow, like the stream, and share with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. There's been a lot of discussion about Jalen Hurts this offseason. Is he overrated? Is he a one-hit wonder who's living off his great 2022 campaign when he led the Eagles to the Super Bowl? He threw 22 touchdowns, had 13 touchdowns on the ground as well that year. And then this past season, we saw him decline in his production. Okay? Now, large reason why Jalen Hurts was so successful in 2022 was because he had Shane Steichen as his offensive coordinator. But with him leaving, we saw Jalen Hurts greatly regress in his play. He wasn't as good when it came to making good decisions with the football. And in the second half of the season, once he started to get banged up, he really just fell apart. And going into 2024, calling Jalen Hurts overrated, I think definitely is fair, but I don't think he's overrated. And why I feel he's not overrated is because if everybody is calling him overrated, then how can he be overrated when he's properly rated? You see, I don't think Jalen Hurts is an elite quarterback. I think he's a very good quarterback. And I think 2022 inflated Jalen Hurts' stock to the point where we don't really know how good he is right now. So what this upcoming season is going to be for him is going to be a recalibration season. We are really about to find out just how good Jalen Hurts is. I don't think he's an average quarterback, but I do think Jalen Hurts is going to be more around that Cam Newton range, where for the majority of Cam Newton's career, I never viewed him as a top 10 quarterback. I always viewed him around the 11th or 12th range in quarterback rankings. And that's the same way I feel about Jalen Hurts. He's not the kind of QB that I feel can overcome limitations. He's a quarterback that can be really effective if you give him a lot of great pieces around him. And during his last couple of years in Philadelphia, he's had one of the best O-lines in the league. He's throwing to one of the best receiving duos in the league, and Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. And he's normally had a really good coaching staff. But when things go haywire, we've seen him kind of fall short when everything isn't the perfect or ideal situation for him. And that's why this year, I view it as the coming out party for Jalen Hurts in the sense where he's going to have to prove that he really is an elite quarterback because he's getting paid like one. Philadelphia gave him an extension way too early. I get that you want to get ahead of the curve because if he balls out again, then he becomes more expensive. But if I know that I'm losing a really good offensive coordinator, I got to see a little bit more out of Jalen Hurts before I give him big time money because I need to know that you truly are an elite quarterback. Because if you're getting paid like one, then you have to be able to overcome certain limitations because when you're getting paid a lot of money, that's going to limit the amount of money that Philadelphia can spend on improving other positions of need. Jalen Hurts in the Super Bowl against Kansas City was absolutely spectacular. But last year against Tampa Bay and the wild card loss to Baker Mayfield, his play was embarrassing. And this year, I'm not about to call him a mid or average quarterback, because I definitely think he's more of a top 11, top 12 quarterback than he is of being a mid QB. But I really think this season is going to define just how truly good Jalen Hurts is. We put so much stock into what he did in 2022 that we got a little bit too ahead of ourselves. We thought he was a top 5 quarterback, and we kind of viewed him a little bit in the same regard as we view Lamar Jackson when he's not in that same realm. At best, I think Jalen Hurts is a top 8 quarterback in a game. I don't think he's a top 5 QB because the top 5 quarterbacks can do more with less. And anytime we've seen Philadelphia have a couple of injuries at wide receiver, like y'all remember when they had Julio Jones out there in the wild card round and they had to overcome some injuries, Jalen Hurts looked like a shell of himself. And if you're an Eagles fan, you can make the excuse and say, well, we didn't have this guy. The play calling wasn't good. That's all the reasoning why he's not an elite quarterback. Guys like Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, what makes them elite? They can overcome limitations. Mahomes just won the Super Bowl with having jabronis at wide receiver and Travis Kelce. That's what you expect when you pay somebody high-end QB money. But with a guy like Jalen Hurts, who may only be as good as his supporting cast and his coaching staff, I'm not about to give him the claim as an elite quarterback. And right now, going into this season, to me, he's more of a really good quarterback than he is an elite quarterback. And this is going to be the season that we recalibrate how we view Jalen Hurts in regards to where he ranks among the rest of the quarterbacks in the National Football League. To me, I think he's going to play at a top 11 level. Maybe he plays better than that because the first half of last season, he did play really good. He was in the MVP discussion for the majority of the season. But once they hit 10-1, things went really left for Jalen Hurts and company. And I get that he had to deal with some injuries, but if you guys watch the Netflix docuseries that came out for these receivers, and if you watch the last year's version when they had the quarterbacks on there, everybody is playing through injuries. Okay, nobody is 100% throughout the entirety of an NFL season. So for Jalen Hurts, I don't want to hear anything about injuries being a reason for his bad play when everybody's playing through something. Okay, this is the year that we find out how good Jalen Hurts is. I don't think he's going to bottom out. I don't think he's going to make the Philadelphia Eagles regret their decision to extend him, but we're just going to find out that he's not as good as what we thought he was after his breakout season in 2022. Because he was that good that year because he had Shane Steichen, a great team around him. And with that being gone, he kind of has came back down to earth, and we know what he is. It's similar to stocks, right? You ever heard of something called a pump and dump? And I remember they had this a lot during COVID when you had these NFTs and these crypto pyramids out there. You know, people would say, oh, I'm creating a new crypto coin, right? And when you first buy into it, it spikes up at a really high price. But then after a while, it starts to come back down. It starts to recalibrate. And then you find out the true price of what the stock is. I remember when I was in AMC, right? AMC went up to $60 at one point. And everybody thought that AMC was going to be like the next GameStop, the next GME, and it was going to skyrocket up to incredible levels. But instead, it plateaued at 60, and then it came back down all the way to $13, and then to the price that the stock is actually worth now. That's what we are about to see with Jalen Hurts this season. Okay, now, I want to talk about my realistic expectations for Caleb Williams going into his rookie season with the Chicago Bears. We know that this dude had a lot of hype when he was coming out of USC. He's been labeled as a generational quarterback prospect. He's gotten a lot of comparisons to Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. He's supposed to be the messiah of the new generation of quarterbacks that are starting to enter the NFL now. And the Chicago Bears, throughout their lifelong existence, despite being one of the longest teams that have been around in the NFL, they have never had elite quarterback play. Caleb Williams in his first season, he could be possibly the first QB in Bears history to throw for more than 4,000 yards. And I don't think that's unrealistic. And I don't want to hear Bears fans saying that we need to temper expectations for this dude. No, when you replace a fan favorite and Justin Fields, who was beloved by players in the locker room and people in the city of Chicago, he needs to be an immediate upgrade. And anything that is short of what you would expect out of a number one quarterback is unacceptable. Out of Caleb Williams this year, I need to see C.J. Stroud, Andrew Luck, or Justin Herbert kind of rookie season. There's no excuses you can make for him not being able to replicate those performances based on the supporting cast that he has going into this season. This may be the best supporting cast that we've ever seen a rookie quarterback have. You got Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. This is arguably the best receiving core in the NFL. We're not even including the other weapons like DeAndre Swift, Roshan Johnson, Cole Kmet, who is a top 10 tight end and an improved offensive line. There's no excuses for Caleb Williams not being able to come out the gate swinging. We need to see this brother actually look like he is the Messiah for the Chicago Bears franchise, because when you get rid of a guy like Justin Fields, that shows us that you feel Caleb Williams is going to be an immediate upgrade. I need to see this dude look like a top 10 quarterback based on the amount of hype that he's had coming in to his rookie year. I've never heard a quarterback prospect be so hyped up as what Caleb Williams has been, and I do think that he is going to deliver on that. He has really good accuracy. He is incredible when it comes to making plays off script. When he gets outside the pocket, that's when he's at his best. And with the wide receivers that he's going to be throwing to, there's no reason why he can't break the Chicago Bears all-time single-season passing yardage record. We need to see that. We need to see him play at a top 10 level. You may say, oh, JT, you're being a little bit too overly ambitious about Caleb Williams. Am I really? Or am I just holding him up to the standard that comes with getting this generational quarterback label? Trevor Lawrence got this generational quarterback label, and we still have yet to see it, which is why he gets called overrated. Trevor Lawrence isn't overrated because he's a bad quarterback. It's just that he hasn't lived up to the hype that came with him being drafted number 1 overall. And that's the same kind of expectation that I'm going to have for Caleb Williams. And if he is anything less than what we saw out of CJ Stroud last year, he's a disappointment. His rookie season is a disappointment to me. Caleb Williams has to take the Chicago Bears to the playoffs this year, and he needs to play well. Now, of course, there are going to be some inconsistencies from game to game sometimes, because despite how good he could be, no matter how good of a rookie quarterback you are, you still are going to have your fair share of struggles. We saw CJ Stroud kind of start out hot out the gate, and then, around the tail end of the season, his play kind of dwindled a little bit. He went from throwing no interceptions at all to throwing multiple interceptions in several games in the second half of 2023. Andrew Luck, he was a turnover machine his first couple of years in the league, but he still elevated his team. If Chicago can't make it to the playoffs and Caleb Williams is doing the same stuff that we saw Justin Fields do, melting in the fourth quarter, then the Chicago Bears pretty much wasted the number 1 overall pick, and they would have been better off just sticking with Justin Fields, either drafting Marvin Harrison number 1 or trading that pick away to get more assets to build up their team. So Caleb Williams, I'm expecting big things out of him this season. I think he's going to throw for 4,100 yards. He's going to have 29, either 30 passing touchdowns, 8 or 9 interceptions. He's going to have 7 or 8 rushing touchdowns, and probably around 600-700 rushing yards, because he is a better athlete than what you would think. And I was listening to Matt Eberflus talk about Caleb Williams and how good he's been up to this point in training camp. The dude says that he's not built as small as what you may think. The dude is kind of built like a linebacker or a running back. So when he gets into the open field, not only does he have enough power to run over defensive backs, but he's also elusive enough where he can put a spin move or a juke move on you and make you look embarrassed in the open field if you're a DB. He has all the talent in the world to be the next Patrick Mahomes or the next Aaron Rodgers or to carve out his own legacy. But the expectations for this dude have to be as high as what they are, considering what you did to draft him, trading away Justin Fields and using the number 1 overall pick to replace him with somebody that is unproven. I don't think what I'm asking for is unrealistic. I think that's just me being fair, and the expectations that comes with having that generational quarterback label, especially when you're getting compared to Patrick Mahomes. If the Bears don't make it to the playoffs this season, it's a disappointment. Considering everything that you have on defense, you had a top 10, nearly top 5 defense after week 9 of last year. Now, if your offense can produce at the level that it should relative to the talent that they have, the Bears not only could make it to the playoffs, but they could win this division, and maybe they win a playoff game or two if Caleb Williams ends up working out. So the Bears are only going to go as far as what Caleb Williams is able to take them, and he needs to play at a high level. I'm expecting this brother to be a top 10 quarterback right out the gate. And anything less than that to me is a disappointment considering the hype. Shout out to everybody in the comment section, man. Shout out to my guy, Kate Rohn. He says people overlooked Roschon Johnson a lot because he was behind Bijan Robinson, but he's a damn good running back too, and I think he'll do great with Adunze too. He's also doomsday at game time in my house. He says, damn, I would love to see Bears finally get a QB throw for 4,000 yards. I mean, you would have thought that they already would have had a quarterback that has thrown for more than 4K yards in the season, considering the fact they've been around longer than me, you, and my grandma, my auntie, and whatnot. I mean, sheesh. Caleb Williams, you would think he would finally be the one, but we will see. Let's segue to some college football talk. We got a new conference. We got a new conference realignment update. The future of Florida State and Clemson in the ACC, according to ESPN, they are expected to remain in this conference up to the 2025-2026 college football season. And this isn't surprising. Most of us thought that they were going to be a lock to either get into the Big Ten or the SEC, but the Big Ten doesn't want Florida State because they don't meet their academic criteria, and the SEC isn't looking to add any more in-state rivals. Now, some people tell me that, you know, the only reason the Big Ten and the SEC aren't being vocal about how much they truly want both of these schools is because they currently are in litigation considering their legal battle for their grantor rights with the ACC. But I never thought that FSU and Clemson were going to go anywhere, because for them to get their grantor rights, they pretty much are trying to throw shit at the wall. They're pretty much trying to find any small reason to find a way to exit the ACC. And the problem is that when the ACC did their media rights deal a few years back, they didn't account for how much college football was going to change. They didn't think about how much popular college football was going to be from that time to what it is now. That's why they're so behind when it comes to the amount of revenue that they're getting from their TV deal compared to the Big Ten and the SEC. And for Florida State and Clemson, two programs who consider themselves to be blue bloods of the sport, they feel they deserve to be paid as much as what the other blue bloods are getting. And for schools like Vanderbilt, Northwestern, Indiana to be getting more money than them on a yearly basis is disrespectful. And plus, when you're in the ACC, you know, people don't view teams in the ACC in the same light as they view teams that play in the Big Ten or the SEC. Let's just be honest about it. Those teams and those conferences do get a little bit of preferential treatment. And we saw that with the playoffs committee's decision to pick Alabama, a one-loss team, over an undefeated Florida State team that won their conference. And that kind of was the hump that broke the camel's back for Florida State wanting out of this conference. Now, if you're the ACC, of course, you're going to fight this thing and you're going to do everything that you can to keep both of these schools in this conference, because you know that if Florida State and Clemson leave, it's over for you. Now, I really thought there was a strong chance that we were going to see both FSU and Clemson join the Big 12, and I still think that that would be a really good option for them, because the Big 12 has a lot of potential to give Florida State and Clemson the revenue that they're seeking, although they're not getting the same amount of money that they are receiving from their television deal in comparisons to the Big 10 and the SEC. But what the Big 12 commissioner, Brent Umark, has done, he's went to outside sources and he's gotten revenue from sources that want to sponsor the conference. Like, they potentially could have a sponsorship deal with Allstate for naming rights. We could hear them be called the Big 12 presented by Allstate or the Allstate 12. And for Florida State, you could benefit from those deals because not only do you get a good slice of the revenue from the TV deal, but also you get a slice of revenue from that. And plus, with you having that blue blood status, you will get a little bit more presidential treatment in a conference like the Big 12 that doesn't have anybody as popular as what you are right now outside of Colorado. And the only reason why Colorado is so hot is because of the Deion Sanders effect. If you are Florida State and Clemson, you may not be able to get out of the ACC now, but you should be able to find a way to finagle your way out of this thing within the next couple of years. Now, I don't know how the hell they're going to find a way to get out of their granted rights deal with the ACC, because it looks like it's pretty set in stone that until this media rights deal that the ACC has for the next couple of years is up, they're stuck in this conference. But Clemson and Florida State are going to find a way to get out of it. But I'm not surprised that they still are stuck in this conference, because their whole legal reasoning for suing the ACC and trying to get out is that, oh, the ACC has too high of an asking price that they want us to pay to leave the conference. No, it's not. If the ACC and you came to agreement and you signed upon the dotted line on it, you have to honor their terms. And if you want to get out, you got to pay what they're asking for. It's like signing a record deal, right? You ever hear artists say that they're getting screwed out of their deal because they're not making what they believe they should from it? Well, that's because when they signed their deal and they got that advance, you got to pay that back. And for you to buy out of a record deal that you don't like, you have to not only pay your upfront back, but you also have to buy back your masters too in the process. So for Florida State and Clemson, I never thought that they had a strong case for being able to leave the ACC. And I was always keeping up with this thing because I really wanted to see just how they were going to try to find a way to finagle out of this, because I never thought that there was any way they were going to get their way. And it's unfortunate that the ACC kind of was a little bit too early on their media rights deal and they weren't able to get ahead of it. And it's destroying the perception of Clemson and Florida State, because with Florida State missing out on the playoffs, that's a detriment to their brand because they got destroyed by Georgia. And what was one of the best seasons that they've had in over a decade was overshadowed by them getting buried and put in a casket by the behemoth that is Georgia, which further shows how dominant the SEC is and tarnishes not just Florida State and Clemson's reputation, but the ACC's reputation as a whole. Because if people are going to put in a one-loss SEC team over an undefeated ACC team, then that shows you that the committee looks at your conference less than what they look at the Big Ten, the SEC, despite it being considered a Power 4 conference. So yes, Florida State, Clemson do have somewhat of a fair reason to want out of the ACC, but legally, it looks like that contract pretty much is going to bind them into this conference for the foreseeable future until they can find a way to fork out the money that is necessary to exit. And even then, I still think that the ACC is going to do everything they can to hold on to these schools, as they should, because once Clemson and Florida State are out of there, everybody else is going to be out of there as well. I don't know how many of you guys know this, but they got an off-season version of Hard Knocks that followed the New York Giants and their front office around, and they look like a bunch of flaming idiots on this thing. First of all, in the first episode, when they were discussing Saquon Barkley's future, they said that they didn't pay Daniel Jones $40 million a year to hand the ball off to a $12 million a year running back, which was a little bit idiotic to me. Because if Daniel Jones is as good as what you believe him to be, then why was it later on during this season of Hard Knocks, following their offseason, that they were interviewing Drake May during the draft process, and they also were really fascinated with Jaden Daniels. When you're interviewing Drake May and you're also intrigued in Jaden Daniels, that shows me that you don't have a lot of confidence in Daniel Jones being the franchise guy for you, and plus, you feel you made a really bad mistake giving him that extension, which we all knew it was a terrible decision. But yet, the New York Giants are willing to double down on it because they say, well, why pay Saquon Barkley $12 million a year when we can use that money to pay for other areas of need? Which I don't have a problem with. And I think that's a actually really good explanation for it. It makes sense. But when you make the comment that we didn't give Daniel Jones that amount of money to hand it off to Saquon Barkley for $12 million a year, it makes you look really foolish, and it makes you sound stupid because it makes you think that Daniel Jones is better than what he actually is. And they did slightly improve their offensive line, but this is still one of the worst rosters in the NFL. Now, the Brian Burns trade, even that was a little bit head-scratching. And when I look at the Giants overall after watching Hard Knocks, I am way more lower on them going into this season than what I was before I watched this. And I was reading people's responses about how they felt about Joe Schoen and the Giants front office after watching this thing. And there were a good amount of Giants fans that felt positive about Joe Schoen and the regime that they have up there after watching this thing. But me personally, I don't see how people feel that way when I just think they just sounded so stupid throughout the entirety of this thing. Every episode, they said something that just rubbed me the wrong way. And when you got the owner coming out to you saying that, I don't really think us letting Saquon Barkley walk away is a good idea when he's the most popular player that we've had in recent memory. And then he also says, if he signs with the Eagles, I'm not going to be able to sleep at night. It makes you look really bad. And plus the owner, when they finally came to the agreement that they were going to let Saquon Barkley walk, he kind of promised them that no matter what happens this year, they aren't going to lose their job because of the handling of Saquon Barkley's, contract talks. But I think that's complete BS. And if I'm the New York Giants owner and they end up winning anything less than 6 games, I'm cutting bait with everybody. Because getting rid of Saquon, to me, was a really bad decision. I understand that you have other areas of need, but you could have still paid Saquon $12 million a year, and you still could have improved the offensive line. You could have used a little bit of that money that you had left over to sign a couple of guys in free agency, and you could have drafted some guys in the draft. The Giants already don't have a good track record when it comes to their free agency acquisitions, which is why I'm not high on Joe Schoen. Everybody was trying to gas up them getting Darren Waller, Paris Campbell, and Adoree Jackson, and none of those guys worked out last year. Paris Campbell was a Giant whiff. Darren Waller retired to pursue a full-time music career. I mean, you didn't have any free agency signings that have worked out. You replaced Saquon Barkley with Devin Singletary. You downgraded. I don't think they're going to have a good rushing attack. And when you have a quarterback like Daniel Jones, who already is not that good, you want to give him as many high-level players as possible. The reason why the Giants went to the postseason year one under Brian Dable wasn't because of Daniel Jones. It was because of how well Saquon Barkley played, plus with Daniel Jones playing good enough where he wasn't losing you games, he was doing enough. Plus, with his athleticism, it made your running game a little bit more dynamic. With Daniel Jones coming off a really devastating injury, is he still going to be the same athlete now that he was prior to sustaining this injury? I strongly doubt that. And when you listen to coaches and defensive players around the league talk about Daniel Jones, they don't talk about this guy in a very high regard. And I get that he hasn't had the most ideal situation. His offensive line has always been complete garbage. Ever since his rookie year, he's never had a good group of receivers. But we seem to forget that this dude was a former first-round pick and a top 10 pick, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember that there were a lot of angry Giants fans who were frustrated with the fact that they drafted Danny Pennies over Dwayne Haskins. And when you get drafted in the first round, especially in the top 10 of the draft, you're supposed to be able to overcome certain limitations. You should be able to elevate your team in some capacity. We obviously know that Daniel Jones has not played up to the standard that you expect from a first-round pick. He's played at what you expect out of a mid-round pick, out of a quarterback that you draft in the 4th or 5th round. And at this point, he's been in the league long enough that you should know what this dude is. Daniel Jones isn't going to be a top 10 quarterback. And he probably won't even be a top 12 quarterback. At best, he'll be a middle-of-the-pack quarterback, which I don't think is good enough to win you a Super Bowl. And to me, if the Broncos are taking the NFL record dead cap hit to get rid of Russell Wilson, why wouldn't you do the same thing with Daniel Jones, knowing that you don't have a lot of confidence in him? And you can't say that, well, we're going to find out just how truly good Daniel Jones is. Daniel Jones is so overhated. How's he overhated when this is the same organization that was interviewing Drake May? Like, if you go and you watch this Hard Knocks off season with the New York Giants and you go see the episode when they're with Drake May, they really love that brother. If he was on the board when it was their turn to pick, they would have drafted him. What does that tell you about how they feel about Daniel Jones? You see, in life, I learned this about people. They'll say one thing and do the complete other. It's kind of the similar thing to when somebody's always preaching about what you need to do with their life or what you need to do with your life, but they don't take their own advice. It makes you look hypocritical. And the Giants look hypocritical when you watch them in Hard Knocks and how they go about the Daniel Jones situation, because sometimes they'll say, yeah, we got a lot of confidence in Daniel Jones, but yet you're scouting the first round caliber rookie quarterbacks, right? It was one scene when, they were discussing Daniel Jones, and they were also got to the draft and they were talking about Jaden Daniels, right? And Joe Schoen looked at Brian Dable and he asked him, hey, how you feel about the Jaden Daniels kid? You know what Brian Dable said? He said, oh, man, I love him. You didn't never hear him say, oh, man, he's okay, but he ain't better than what we got now. Even they know that they effed up and they made a terrible situation. I don't get why you would double down on trying to build around that when you could just start over and keep Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is way more important to the Giants than what Daniel Jones is. Saquon, to me, was the soul of that offense. He's the main reason for why they had that surprising playoff run a few years back. But now without him, you're leaning on the unproven group of wide receivers. I love Malik Neighbors. He's about the only wide receiver who I trust on that roster. Darius Slayton is okay, but he's a number 3 fringe wide receiver 2 at best. I don't see an offense that has a lot of playmakers. Their offensive line still isn't that improved. They still have a good amount of holes on defense. Plus, they downgraded that defensive coordinator when you lose Wink Martindale. After watching Hard Knocks, what I believed about the Giants was furthermore reinforced that they're going to be, if not the worst team in the league, one of the worst this season. Because this franchise just looked idiotic. After every episode I watched, it doesn't seem like they got a good idea of what it takes to build a team. And I know some Giants fans are going to disagree and feel opposite about Joe Schoen and what the front office did. But if you go off the track record of the Giants and what this regime has done in free agency, a lot of their free agency signings haven't worked. And a good amount of their draft picks have been hit or miss. They got a couple of good players on defense, but offensively, Evan Neal is a bust, and they still are going to continue to start this guy this year. And as long as he's still out there, things aren't really going to get too better for Daniel Jones. And you can move on the offensive guard, but the Giants just aren't good when it comes to drafting offensive linemen. You remember when they drafted Eric Flowers a few years ago? Some of you guys may be a little bit too young to remember Eric Flowers, but he kind of was just as bad as what Evan Neal is, and they try to move him to guard also. So my impressions on the Giants after watching their off-season Hard Knocks is that they're going to be as bad as what I thought they are. And when I do my record predictions later on this episode, I'm not even going to lie to y'all. I don't have them winning no more than 4 games. They're going to be terrible because they don't have a good quarterback. Brian Dable can't get along with the guys on his staff. I just don't see the Giants being anything more than a team that's going to be in the tank for Carson Beck or Shedeur Sanders sweepstakes this year. Now, I got one more thing I want to talk about before I give you guys my NFL record predictions for this season is Oklahoma. Oklahoma is being severely underestimated this year. They currently have the 9th best odds to win the SEC this season behind Texas A&M, Missouri, and Tennessee. And they got an over-under win total of 7.5. Now, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek of my SEC record predictions. I got Oklahoma winning at least 9 games. And if they win 9 games, they possibly could sneak in as the 12th or 11th seed in the new expanded playoffs this year. Oklahoma is one of the most complete teams in this conference going into this year. They got a great defense that is being criminally underrated. This was a defense that was one of the best in the nation at forcing takeaways. They got outstanding secondary with lots of experience, a lot of talent, guys that they develop from recruiting, and these guys could be potential high-end NFL players potentially in the future. Offensively, they've done a good job of recruiting and developing on that end as what they've done on defense. They got a fantastic group of wide receivers. You got Jackson Arnold, who was the former Gatorade Player of the Year. I believe he was the Elite 11 MVP. Gavin Sawchuk was on a tear the last couple of games this last year. I mean, Oklahoma has a lot of talent and a lot of upside to win the SEC this year. Now, that may be a little bit bold, but I believe that Oklahoma is a top 5, top 6 team entering the SEC this year. And I think that they could be as good or possibly better than what Texas could be this year, because Texas has way more questions defensively than what Oklahoma has. The only concern that we have for Oklahoma is their offensive line, but I think they're going to have that fixed up this year. And if their offensive line shows up and Jackson Arnold plays up to his capability, this is a team that's ceiling is SEC championship. Oklahoma has recruited good enough where they are talented enough to rival other SEC schools like Tennessee, Texas. Hell, they already beat Texas. Texas beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa last year. So if you can beat Texas, you can beat any team in the SEC. The only SEC team I can't see Oklahoma beating this year is Georgia, because Georgia is just a completely different animal. But anybody else, I think is fair game. And I keep telling you guys that the SEC, I don't think it's going to go the way that a lot of people think it is. Texas and Georgia are the 2 favorites, but it's a strong possibility that one of those 2 teams don't even get into the conference championship game. Oklahoma is a big sleeper team in the Southeastern Conference this year. Brent Venables, there was a little bit of skepticism around him recently getting a new extension, but Oklahoma has improved under him every year, and they are recruiting at a way higher level under Brent Venables than what they ever did under Lincoln Riley. Every year that Brent Venables has been down there in Norman, they've had nothing less than a top 10 recruiting class, plus they're doing a really good job of developing these players. So they have a top 10 roster going into this year. And when you are a top 10 team from a talent standpoint, you have a great chance to win in the SEC. I don't think that Oklahoma, who just came off a 10-win season last year, is going to come into this conference and be a middle-of-the-road team. I love taking the over when it comes to their 7.5 win total. I definitely think that this team is better than what people are giving them credit for. They're going to have outstanding defense. This is a top 3 defense that they have walking into this year, and nobody's talking about them. You see, I think the problem with Oklahoma is that they aren't as flashy as what some of the other teams are, like Missouri, Tennessee. You don't know too much about Oklahoma because you don't really view them as a team that can always win it all every year. But I think that's a false perception to have about Oklahoma, because not a lot of people are really digging into how well they've recruited, how well they've utilized the transfer portal, and how good Brent Venables and that staff have been down there at developing talent. All those things are key components to being successful in the SEC. I can't see this squad winning anything less than 8 games this year. At the bare minimum, they should win 9. And their ceiling is possibly winning it all. We seem to forget that Oklahoma aren't they a blue blood in some regard? Haven't they won a few national titles in the past? Like, Oklahoma doesn't get talked about as much as what Texas does, and they've beaten Texas. Isn't that crazy? People are picking Texas to win the SEC, but yet they think Oklahoma is going to be a middle-of-the-road team when the gap between the two schools isn't that wide. Oklahoma, have they recruited up to the level that Texas has? No, but it's not too far off. Texas is recruiting at a top 5, nearly top 3 level, but Oklahoma isn't too far off. They're bringing in top 10 classes. They're bringing in elite quarterbacks. There's a strong chance that maybe Jackson Arnold is better than what Quinn Ewers is. And Quinn Ewers is in what? His 4th or 5th season? Don't underestimate the Sooners this year, because I really believe that this is going to be a team that is going to surprise a lot of people this year. Many people are picking them to go 7-5, 6-6. I think that is highly disrespectful considering how well they've gone about recruiting, developing talent, and what they have on that roster, especially on defense going into this year. The SEC kind of, over the last couple of years, has turned into what the Big 12 used to be. All offense, no defense. I watched Ole Miss and LSU trade blows. You know, it was a game that both those teams combined for 100 points. Lane Kiffin was sweating the last drive of that game when his defense had to get the stop, because he knew that that defense might not have been good enough to get it done. Oklahoma is a complete team this year. There are a lot of teams going into the SEC this year where we either got concerns about how good the offense is going to be or how good the defense is going to be, or we don't trust the coaching. With Oklahoma, you get the best of both worlds. You know that the coaching is going to be pretty solid. You know that you got a great team from a talent standpoint. You're going to have a great defense that's finally going to be able to get after the quarterback. That's been their biggest problem, and they addressed that in the transfer portal. They got the transfer out of Miami of Ohio, and they got a really good defensive tackle that everybody wanted from TCU. They also have a really good NIL infrastructure. Those folks down in Norman are really passionate about their football. And I'm pretty sure that they're going to be way better than what a lot of you guys think they are this season, year 1 in the SEC. Before I move on to the grand finale, what you guys have been waiting all off season for, my NFL predictions, I got to remind you guys to hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we go live and when we upload new content. Remember that we are not just a YouTube channel. You can find this episode and all our other ones in audio format wherever you get your podcast from. Apple, Spotify, Amazon. JT Sports Podcast is available. Give us a 5-star review if you enjoy. If you're listening on X, retweet the stream, follow if you're new, and leave a like. Also, we're going to be doing a mailbag episode fairly soon. If you have an NFL or college football question that you would like answered, send them in the DMs on Instagram at JTSports_ and on X at JTSports__. You definitely want to make sure that you're following us on Instagram, man. We post some bonus content on there that I think a lot of you guys would greatly enjoy. So go ahead, submit your mailbag questions on IG and on X if you would like them answered on a future mailbag episode. Shout out to everybody in the chat, man. Shout out to my guy, Sean Ackridge. He says, on vacation in Tampa, Clearwater, and damn, it rains like every day, JT. Yeah, that's Florida for you, man. It's always a thunderstorm that comes out of nowhere. It's sunny for 30 minutes, and then it's back raining again. Shout out to my guy, Kate Rohn. He says, oh, yeah, you would be better than Texas. You're right about that. Shout out to my guy, M Sparks. He says, One of my boys, cuz, plays on OU. He's a dog from the Berg. Shout out to everybody in the comment section, man. And let's get into it. It's NFL prediction time. I'm here to give you guys my NFL record predictions plus my Super Bowl picks for the upcoming 2024-2025 NFL season. I'm not going to be giving you guys in-depth breakdowns because I don't want this to drag on longer than what it needs to be. So let's start off with the AFC West. We got the Las Vegas Raiders. I got them coming in last place in this division at 4-13. Listen, I love Antonio Pierce. It's just that they don't have a good quarterback situation. Aiden O'Connell didn't look good anytime they played against a great defense last year or a team that had a record of 500 or better. And plus, you got Devontae Adams, who recently did a podcast with Shannon Sharp talking about he would have no problem with Tom Brady coming out of retirement despite how old he is. I don't think Devontae Adams has a lot of confidence in that quarterback situation despite all the positive things that he tries to say. Aiden O'Connell does have a little bit of upside, but at best, I don't see him any more than a journeyman quarterback, similar to a Ryan Fitzpatrick. Gardner Minshew is kind of the same way, and that's the thing that holds the Raiders back because they got one of the more difficult schedules in the NFL this year. You got to play in a really tough division with a Jim Harbaugh coach Chargers team. You got to play Kansas City twice. I don't think you're going to get lucky and beat them like how you did on Christmas Day last year. Plus, you're going to be a team that's going to win by running the football and relying on great defense. And with you having a difficult schedule going against a lot of elite quarterbacks like Lamar, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, I just don't think your style of winning equates to you having a lot of success this year. And you're pretty much a diet version of what the Pittsburgh Steelers have been over the last couple of years. Yeah, you're good in other areas outside of quarterback, but your quarterback play is just so abysmal that it's just going to hinder the performance of this team. If you had a better quarterback, or let's say that you drafted Jaden Daniels or Michael Penix in the first round this past year, I would see you as a potential playoff team. But the quarterback position is the most important in the NFL. You don't have one. I can't see you having too much success, especially when you have a defensive-minded head coach. If you have an offensive-minded head coach, he can elevate a guy like Aiden O'Connell. But when you hire Luke Getsy, who is one of the worst OCs in the game, he got fired by the Chicago Bears, I got to question your offense and your quarterback play. I just don't see it being that great. I got the Denver Broncos finishing in third place in the AFC West at 7-10. The Broncos are going to be a little bit better than what people think. I don't think they're going to be a dog shit team. I believe with Bo Nix getting drafted by one of the greatest offensive minds in league history, he's going to have a really outstanding rookie season. They got a really good offensive line. It's just that when you look at their defense, they don't really have a lot of elite players on defense. You got Patrick Surtain and maybe two other guys who may be pretty good, but outside of that, your defense isn't going to be that good this year. Now, Vince Joseph was able to turn things around after the Dolphins dropped 70 on them, but that was mainly because of how good they were at forcing turnovers. And coming away with takeaways isn't something that always is consistent on a year-to-year basis. I think the Broncos are going to be one of those teams that they're going to be a tough out anytime you play them, but late in games, they're going to struggle to finish and walk away with W's. I got Kansas City finishing in second place in the AFC West. They've won this division for nearly every year I've been watching football, but I think this year it finally comes to an end. Yes, they still are a really good team, but they got some concerns on the offensive line. They got a position battle going on for left tackle. We don't know how that's going to play out. Jawan Taylor wasn't that good, and they spent a lot of money on him in free agency. At wide receiver, you added Xavier Worthy and Marquise Brown, but Marquise Brown he's more of a Robin than he is a Batman. He also has a problem with drops. And I love Hollywood Brown. He comes from Florida. He's a Florida boy. I always got to support my Florida brethren out there. But I don't think he's that good enough where he's just going to completely move the needle for Kansas City. And I think this is the year that Kansas City may come up a little bit short in the postseason. And they are what people thought they would have been last year. So I got them at 11-6. You know that they're going to have a really good defense, and they still are going to be a really good team, but their schedule is a lot more harder compared to the Los Angeles Chargers, who I have winning the AFC West with the 12-5 record. The Jim Harbaugh impact cannot be overlooked. This dude has won everywhere he's been. San Diego State, just won a national championship at Michigan. His first 3 years coaching in the NFL, he took the 49ers from being irrelevant bottom feeders to 3 straight NFC conference championship games and a Super Bowl appearance during that span. And with him having Justin Herbert, I think that's going to be good enough for this to be a playoff team. Also with them having a really good offensive line, they're going to have a dominant rushing attack, something that they've lacked the last couple of years under the previous regime. Greg Roman, he's going to have Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins looking like studs. And even if one of those guys go down, with how good Greg Roman's run scheme is, his scheme elevates whoever he has at running back. And although there are concerns about the wide receiver position, Ladd McConkey is going to be a stud. He runs fantastic routes. He's a great separator. Normally when you're good at those two areas, you end up being a pretty damn good wide receiver. And you don't need to have an elite wide receiving core to win in today's NFL. Just look at who the Chiefs won the Super Bowl with last year at wideout. And when Jim Harbaugh was coaching with the 49ers, he didn't have great receivers. He had Michael Crabtree and Vernon Davis. Jim Harbaugh is going to win the way that he knows best. Smash mouth football, being physical at the point of attack. They're also going to have a really good defense. His defensive coordinator, Jesse Minter from Michigan, was outstanding. He follows him to the NFL as well. With the Chargers having a more easier, favorable schedule than Kansas City, I think that's going to be a large reason why they end up winning this division. And I got them at 12-5. Moving on to the AFC East. New England, I got them at 2-15. I was struggling with my prediction for the Patriots because even though on paper they don't look that good, if Gerard Mayo is as good as what the Patriots front office believes he can be, because this dude and his contract did have a stipulation when Bill Belichick retired or got fired that he was going to be his successor. My problem with the Patriots is that I don't like their offense at all. Now, they do have some receivers that I like. Pop Douglas, who's from the 904. You also have Javon Baker, who you drafted in the later rounds of this past year's NFL draft. One of the biggest sleepers in the draft, in my opinion. He was my 6th-ranked wide receiver. It's just that your quarterback situation isn't good. Jacoby Brissett, I don't think he's going to be good enough to win you a lot of games. Drake May, I could see him struggling behind the offensive line. That's a little And plus, Alex Van Pelt, as an offensive coordinator, he hasn't really proven that he's a good play caller. The last time he was calling plays with the Buffalo Bills back in 2009, they had one of the worst offenses in the NFL that season, and he never called plays with the Cleveland Browns neither. Him and Deshaun Watson didn't get along. I just feel that although their defense should still be pretty good, not as good as what it has been the last couple of years under Bill Belichick, that is going to keep them from being a team that you just look at and like, oh yeah, we're going to blow them out. They are going to be able to have a lot of close games, but they're going to come up short because I just don't think they're going to get enough production offensively. This is a team that mainly is going to win because of the run game and having a good defense, and I just think their quarterback play is going to be a detriment to them. Plus, Alex Van Pelt, I don't have a lot of confidence in him neither, which is why I have them going 2-15. The Dolphins I have at 7-10. I know a lot of people are going to be really surprised about this, but I just see something going wrong for the Dolphins this year. They lost a lot of talent on the interior of their offensive line. I don't think they did a really good job of replacing those guys in the offseason. Last year, they struggled against good teams. They had a losing record against teams that had a record of 500 or better, dating back all the way to 2022, the second half of that year. Tua doesn't look good in big games neither. This is an offense that averaged over 30 points per game when they were going against teams that had a losing record. But when they went against teams that had winning records and were playoff teams, guess how many points they averaged? They went from 30 to only 13. And it's evident because, think about it, they put 70 on the Denver Broncos and then got blown the hell out the following week by the Buffalo Bills, who hung 40 on them. They also downgraded at defensive coordinator. I don't care if the players didn't get along with Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio drastically improved that defense. And for how good that defense was, considering all the injuries they had, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips went down, you were without Jalen Ramsey for a good portion of last year. That was a damn good defense. And that defense was the sole reason why they still had the shot to win a lot of those games against good teams when their offense was putting up duds. So I just don't have a good feeling about the Dolphins this year. I think they're in for a little bit of a down season. I got them going 7-10. The New York Jets, surprisingly, I have them at 10-7, being a playoff team. And it's like, I feel the same way about the Jets as I feel about the Miami Dolphins, man. I just have a weird feeling about this team, but at the same time, I still have a hard time writing off Aaron Rodgers. Okay, I know the brother has been doing a lot of weird stuff lately. You know, the dude missed mandatory minicamp to go do a drug called ayahuasca. It's just, with Aaron Rodgers, it's just, look, I give you the benefit of a doubt because you're Aaron Rodgers. And the New York Jets, they do have a really good roster, despite them having a couple of players that are a little bit injury prone. You know, their defense is at worst going to be a top 10 unit. As long as Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy, this should be a playoff team. And a lot of their losses last year, they would have won if they had better quarterback play. You remember when they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs? Zach Wilson played the best game of his career and yet still lost that game because he turned the ball over late in the fourth quarter. If you had Aaron Rodgers, you win that game. So not having Aaron last year costed the Jets potentially 3 or 4 potential wins. With him being fully healthy, I believe he's going to bounce back. He's a Hall of Fame caliber player. Hall of Fame caliber players regress at a slower rate than normal, especially when you're an all-time great like Aaron Rodgers. You always just find a way to beat the odds and overcome adversity. So despite how questionable the New York Jets coaching staff is, Nathaniel Hackett kind of being a noob as an offensive coordinator, I still believe that the Jets are going to succeed this year. So I got them at 10-7. I got the Buffalo Bills at 10-7 also, but since I believe they're going to have a better record inside this division, I got them going 5-1 against every team in the AFC East this year. They're going to end up winning this division once again. Some people are a little bit down on Buffalo because of how much they lost this offseason, losing their 2 best receivers from last year, Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs to Houston. You also lost a lot of vets on defense, but Sean McDermott is one of the better defensive minds in the game. Josh Allen still is a top 3, probably the second best quarterback in the game, depending on who you ask. I love Keon Coleman. You got Dalton Kincaid, who people seem to be overlooking this year. People keep asking, who's going to be the number 1 guy in this offense? Is it going to be Keon Coleman? Is it going to be this dude? It's going to be Dalton Kincaid. If you play fantasy football, make sure that you draft Dalton Kincaid early. This dude is going to do big numbers this year. He had a fantastic rookie season when their other tight end, Dawson Knox, went down. And his rookie season got a little bit overshadowed with how good Sam Laporta was. But the Buffalo Bills, to me, still are the best team in this division. I trust them a lot more than I trust the Jets and any other team in this division. They smacked the Dolphins the 2 times they played last year. I don't really see that changing that much. So I have them winning the AFC East again, going 10-7. Moving on to the AFC South, I got the Tennessee Titans going 5-12. The Titans are a really hard team to predict because if Will Levis balls out, they're good enough to not only win this division, but they could make a deep playoff run. But at the same time, Brian Callahan has never called plays, so we don't know how good he's going to be as a play caller. Will Levis, he only had 2 good performances last year, and the rest of them were below average. He played really good in his debut against the Atlanta Falcons. He had a solid game and their upset win against the Miami Dolphins. I think it was Monday or Thursday Night Football. I don't remember when, but outside of those 2 games, man, I wasn't really impressed. I think he needs to get a lot better when it comes to reading defenses. He has a really good deep ball, but I just don't know about Will Levis. I just need to see it. I think that defense is going to take a major step back as well. Mike Vrabel had that defense playing at an insanely high level, and it was always surprising because the Tennessee Titans are one of those teams that always seem to have bad luck when it comes to injuries. By the time you get to the middle portion of the season, half of their roster is on IR. So for Tennessee, I just have them at 5-12. Have a lot of concerns about Brian Callahan. Well, I won't say concerns, but I don't know about him, and I don't know about Will Levis. I love the team that they have around those guys, but it's just, man, I just don't know about them. I got them at 5-12. I got the Indianapolis Colts going 7-10. The reason why I'm having a hard time seeing Indianapolis as a playoff team this year is because Anthony Richardson, I still believe, is going to be very inconsistent, and he's going to look really raw this year. You see, the selling point with AR last year is that if you start him, you can win games with his athleticism, and plus, what he needed was more in-game reps. Well, with his rookie season getting cut short due to that shoulder injury, we don't know just how improved he's going to be, because the only way Anthony Richardson can get better is by playing in games. That's the thing that was the biggest knock on him coming out of Florida, is that he was really inexperienced. And when you take away all those rookie games from him, you still have a fairly inexperienced quarterback that's still going to be very inconsistent throwing the football, and there's going to be a lot of ups and downs with him. And that's why I got them going 7-10. Plus, their secondary still hasn't improved. They still don't really have a lot of talent on that end. They did improve their pass rush a tad bit, Anthony Richardson, but he's also going to have some games where, you know, he struggles. He has about 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. It's going to be a lot of inconsistency out of Anthony Richardson this year. I got the Jaguars finishing second in the AFC South behind the Houston Texans. I have them going 9-8 this year. I like their new defensive coordinator that they hired from the Atlanta Falcons, and Ryan Nielsen. He did a fantastic job with that Falcons defense. I thought that unit was very underrated. He's going to maximize the talent that they have on that defensive line. Trayvon Walker, we could see him take another big step, and maybe he gets the double-digit sacks, and that's going to be scary considering that Josh Allen is coming off a monstrous season last year. They also have a pretty decent secondary. Offensively, I still don't really know what to expect from Jacksonville, because although Trevor Lawrence was inconsistent for most of the second half of 2023 due to injuries, the play calling from Press Taylor was not that great. Doug Peterson still hasn't given a word if he's going to take back play calling or if he's still going to leave it in Press Taylor's hands. Still don't really know about the offensive line this year also. I just see the Jags, that's a 9-8 team, but that doesn't mean they can't make it to the playoffs. And I got the Houston Texans winning this division for a second consecutive season. They just have one of the best overall rosters in the league, and they probably are the most improved team going into this season, man. They went from a team that was, you know, the biggest surprise of the league to pretty much a Super Bowl contender now, considering what they have on offense. Stephon Diggs makes that receiving core the best in the league with Nico Collins, Tank Dell. You also got Don Schultz at tight end. You traded for Joe Mixon also. CJ Stroud should win MVP this year, because when you have a team that has 2 of the best route runners in the league, at least one of those dudes are going to be open. They got a lot of depth. The only concern is their offensive line. If their offensive line takes a step up, this is going to be a scary team this year. You know that defense is going to be even better going into year 2 under the Miko Ryans with the new pieces that they're going to be bringing in. I love the Houston Texans to make a deep playoff run this year. I got them winning the AFC South again. Moving on to the AFC North, I got my Pittsburgh Steelers coming in at 7-10. I don't ever want to hear you guys call me biased. I get really pissed off when you guys say I'm being biased because I got my favorite team going 7-10. I just don't see it with Pittsburgh this year, man. I get that Mike Tomlin always finds a way to get a winning season out of his rear end, but I think this year really comes to an end. The schedule is really difficult, and the quarterback situation I don't really think has improved all that much because Russell Wilson is on the decline. There's a reason why Denver took a record-setting dead cap hit to get rid of him. I think he was only as good as what he was statistically because the Broncos were always playing from behind, and Sean Payton is one of the best offensive minds in league history, so he was able to get the most out of Russell Wilson. I just don't like the Steelers quarterback situation. And that's the same problem that I have with the Las Vegas Raiders. However, they are going to be able to win some games that you don't think they should win, but they also are going to lose a good amount of games that they have no business losing. And if you've been following the Pittsburgh Steelers for a while, you know that Mike Tomlin always has a tendency to lose games that he has no business losing, such as when they lost back-to-back against the Arizona Cardinals and the New England Patriots last year. I just don't see it with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Until they get a damn quarterback in there, I can't see them having much success. The only reason they swept the Ravens last year was because, for one, yes, you did beat Lamar when you played them the first time in the regular season, but you barely were able to beat their JV squad in the final game of the regular season. And two, you were able to beat Cincinnati because they didn't have Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is going to be fully healthy. I think those could be two potential L's for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I definitely expect the Ravens to at least split the season series when they play this year. Quarterback is just why I can't believe in Pittsburgh this year. And I think this is going to be Mike Tomlin's first ever losing season. I got the Browns coming in at 8-9 this year. They're a big mystery team this year because if Deshaun Watson bounces back and we see the version of him that we saw back in Houston, this could be a team that could be good enough to win it all this year. But I just think at this point, what we've seen out of Deshaun Watson these last couple of years is just what he is at this point. He's regressed, and I just don't think he's that good of a quarterback anymore. He's pretty much a middle-of-the-pack quarterback. They are going to have a good defense because they still have Jim Schwartz as their defensive coordinator, and that is going to be a big reason why they're going to win a good amount of games this year. But I just can't see Deshaun Watson shaking back. I just think that we've seen a big fall off from grace out of him, and that contract that they gave him fully guaranteed is going to go down as one of the biggest contract blunders in NFL history. So I got them at 8-9. 12-5, I have the Baltimore Ravens going. The Baltimore Ravens are still the best team in the NFL, arguably when it comes to a talent standpoint. They got one of the most complete rosters in the league. Plus, you add Derrick Henry, who could be the missing piece to them getting over the hump. But I got them finishing in second place in the AFC North this year, despite how good they still are. Losing Mike McDonald is going to be a huge loss for them because this dude is considered to be the Sean McVay of defensive-minded coaches. So, of course, when you lose him, I don't care who the hell you have replacing him, that defense is going to have a slight drop-off. Not a major drop-off, but just a little bit of a slight drop-off. So, I got them going 12-5. And I got the Cincinnati Bengals going 13-4, winning this division. Look, when Joe Burrow got injured, you knew their season was over. But even when he got injured, they were still pretty competitive. They still won a couple of games with Jake Browning. They showed a little bit of fight, but their defense had a really down year under Lou Anarumo, who normally has a pretty well-coached and really good defense. That defense should bounce back this year. They had to start a lot of young guys in that secondary last year. A lot of those guys are going to be more experienced this year, such as Jordan Battle. He's a breakout player to look out for on the defensive end of things. I think their defensive line should still be pretty solid. And offensively, you know, even though Joe Burrow had a slow start the last season, when he started to heat up and he just absolutely torched the 49ers, he showed why he's the second best quarterback in the league. This is the only quarterback right now that has a postseason win against Patrick Mahomes. So if Cincinnati's offensive line improves, which it should, with what they have a receiver with Jermaine Burton, who you just drafted, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, there's going to be a really explosive offense, and they're going to be really hard to stop with the defense that should bounce back this year. I got them going 13-4, winning the AFC North this year. Now we move on to the NFC, starting off with the NFC West. I got the Arizona Cardinals going 6-11. This is going to be a team that, to me, they're going to be Kyler Murray, and that's pretty much it. If this offense cannot score everybody they play, they're not going to win too many games, man, because that defense looks really bad on paper, man. I don't know where the pass rush is going to come from. They still have Budda Baker in the secondary, but that's all about it they got in the secondary, man. That defense just looks putrid. Jonathan Gannon, a defensive-minded coach. He may be able to slightly elevate that unit a tad bit, but I don't know, man. I think that this is going to be an offensive-dependent team, and they are going to be really good offensively. And when Kyler Murray came back, they were a really good team. And I was a little bit conflicted when I had them going 6-11. I was like, should I redo it, or should I just redo all of this? Because Arizona did have a lot of close games that you didn't expect them to be close, especially, didn't they beat the Dallas Cowboys last year, if I'm not mistaken? So, yeah, man, like Arizona did have a couple of close games in there. They did have a couple of upset wins, and they beat Pittsburgh. And when Kyler Murray came back, they were a really tough out. But I don't see that defense being good this year. I expect this to be one of the worst defenses in the National Football League this year. And that's ultimately why I got them going 6-11. I got the Seahawks going 10-7. This is the most underrated team in the NFL coming into this season, man. People forget how much talent Seattle has. They've done a fantastic job of drafting, especially on the defensive side. The only problem is that Pete Carroll the last couple of years has held that defense back because he's been running an outdated scheme. Now with Mike McDonald, somebody who's supposed to be seen as the Sean McVay of defensive-minded coaches, I expect this to be an elite defense this year. Offensively, Geno Smith wasn't a problem last year. The offensive line wasn't that good, and that was a huge reason for his inconsistent play. Geno is still good enough to win you 10 games if you give him the necessary pieces. They got a really good OC who came from Washington under Kalen DeBoer. So this is going to be a really good team this year, man. They got receivers. They got really good running backs. They have a lot of talent and depth on defense, especially when it comes to their pass rush. Seattle is a really underrated team. I have them going 10-7. The Los Angeles Rams, I have them going 10-7 as well, along with the Seattle Seahawks. The Rams defensively, I think they could take a step back, with them losing their defensive coordinator, Raheem Morris, to Atlanta to become their new head coach. Offensively, they still are going to be really good. It's just that, I can't see them winning any more. Well, I could see them winning more than 10 games, but it's just, Seattle's going to be really good this year. I don't think their schedule is that easy as well. So I got them winning 10 games. And I got the 49ers going 13-4, winning the NFC West again. This still is the best team in this division. Even if they do trade away Brandon Aiyuk, whenever Ricky Pearsall gets off NFI, he's going to be a stud. They have some concerns on the offensive line, but I think they'll end up getting that figured out. Brock Purdy is the most overhated player in the league behind Lamar Jackson. That defense should still be pretty good. They do have a new DC, so we're going to see how making that defensive coordinator change improves the defense. They are going to have Hufanga coming back fully healthy. We seem to forget how good he was prior to sustaining that season-ending injury last year. And the 49ers are a team that you should see in the Final Four of this year in the postseason. Moving on to the next division, man. We got to talk about the New York Giants, bro. If you're a Giants fan, the only reason you're going to have the turn on Giants game is to watch New York Giants. The only reason you're going to have of what... I can't talk right now, man. If you're a New York Giants fan, the only reason you're going to have to watch the Giants play this year is because of Malik Neighbors. This dude is going to be must-see TV. But outside of that, you did improve the offensive line, but I don't really know if those free agency moves are going to work out just based off the New York Giants' history of their free agency moves. Remember, last year they signed Paris Campbell. They traded for Darren Waller. They got Adoree Jackson. And really, none of those guys really materialized or did anything worthwhile. Daniel Jones is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. And after watching Hard Knocks, which follow their offseason moves in the front office, it's just, I got really low expectations for the Giants this year. I think they're going to be in the tank for Carson Beck or Shedeur Sanders sweepstakes. The Commanders, I have them going 5-12. Some people feel this could be a sleeper team this year, and I could see that, but I expect Jaden Daniels to have some inconsistent games. He'll have some good games here, he'll have some bad games there. Dan Quinn, as a head coach, it just doesn't really get me going. The last time he was a head coach in Atlanta, his defenses weren't really that good, and his defenses were really good the last couple of years. He's been the defensive coordinator in Dallas, and they did make some really good free agency signings, such as bringing in Frankie Louisville and Jeremy Chin on defense, but I just don't see it with the Commanders this year. I could see this team taking a big jump next year in 2025 when Jaden Daniels goes into year 2, but their offensive line is still a big concern, and I'm just not a big fan of Dan Quinn. I got the Dallas Cowboys at 8-9 this year. I think they're going to miss the playoffs. This team has a lot of red flags. Their offensive line is concerning. The wide receiving position is concerning. Brandon Cooks could regress. Their running back position is concerning. I bet you guys can't even name me a single running back on that team not named Ezekiel Elliott. Their defense is still really talented, but they downgraded, losing Dan Quinn and replacing him with Mike Zimmer, who was the former head coach on the Minnesota Vikings. And Mike Zimmer is regarded as a really good defensive mind. But the problem is that I feel his defenses have gotten worse as he's gotten older with age. His last 2 years in Minnesota, his defenses ranked near the bottom of every statistical category in the NFL, which led to his demise and why he got fired. I just have a lot of concerns with the Dallas Cowboys this year. You got some tensions brewing between Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones. I just don't think the Cowboys are going to have a good season. And I got the Philadelphia Eagles winning this division, going 12-5. The problem with Philly last year was that Nick Sirianni whiffed on his staff hires. Staff hires are really overlooked. People only talk about who the coordinators are when they're bad. But when they're good, nobody really knows too much about them until they end up getting hired and becoming head coaches. With you bringing in Kellen Moore, he's going to be way better than what you had last year. And Kellen Moore isn't the best offensive coordinator in the world, but he's good enough that he's a safe hire for you. You know that your offense is in safe hands with him. Defensively, I felt like Vic Fangio was probably the best staff hire that any team made this offseason. This defense is already insanely talented. They underperformed massively relative to what they had going into last year. They're stacked on the defensive line. They got some really good linebackers. I love what they have at cornerback this year. You got Quinyon Mitchell. You got Cooper DeJean, the white cornerback out of Iowa. I can't wait to see those guys in action this year. You added Saquon Barkley in free agency. That's going to be a massive pickup for the Philadelphia Eagles, man. The Philadelphia Eagles, to me, this is a top 3 team going into this year, and they definitely still are in the Super Bowl conversation. They don't need Jalen Hurts to play at an elite level. They just need him to play at a good enough level to what he played at last year prior to him kind of falling off after they went 10-1. So I got Philadelphia winning this division at 12-5. The Minnesota Vikings, I have them going 8-9. Some people may feel like this is a little bit too nice for Minnesota. We don't know how good J.J. McCarthy is going to be. Most people are pretty low on him. I'm pretty low on him also, along with Sam Darnold. But Kevin O'Connell was able to make the most of his quarterback situation last year. They were still competitive despite having Joshua Dobbs, who had a couple of decent showings until he just completely fell off the rails. And then you had Nick Mullins, who just was a turnover machine. But Sam Darnold, maybe he could be good enough for the Vikings to win some games. I remember when he was playing for the Carolina Panthers a few years ago, and Steve Wilks took over as the interim head coach. Sam Darnold played pretty well. And Sam Darnold can be serviceable for you. But that's the problem. He's going to be serviceable for you, which means that he's not going to win you a lot of games. He's not going to lose you too many games neither, but he's just a middle-of-the-road quarterback. The large reason why I can see the Vikings winning 8 games this year is because they got Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator. That defense was outstanding last year, and they're only going to get better since they have improved in several areas on that defense as well. But I got them going 8-9, missing the postseason this year. The Chicago Bears, my record prediction for them is 9-8. You got Caleb Williams, who should make this offense explosive with what he's going to be throwing to at wide receiver. The offensive line is going to be pretty solid. You know that you're going to have a really outstanding defense. It's just that I don't know about Matt Eberflus as a coach, and despite how good I believe Caleb Williams is going to be as a rookie, you know, with rookies, there are always going to be a couple of inconsistent games. I don't think their schedule is the easiest. They do play in a pretty tough division, so I could see them being a team that is competing for the 7th seed in the NFC, but maybe they come a little bit closer, missing out on the playoffs this year. Maybe they are able to sneak into the playoffs. We will see. I got the Green Bay Packers at 11-6. To me, the Packers are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. You got Jeff Hafley taking over as your defensive coordinator after getting rid of Joe Barry, who severely underutilized the talent that the Packers have on defense. From a talent standpoint, the Packers have a top 7 defense in the league. When Rashawn Gary is healthy, he's one of the better defensive players in the league, and he's a sneaky candidate to win Defensive Player of the Year, man. He definitely has the talent to do so. The question is, can he stay healthy? You got Jair Alexander. Like, there are a lot of dogs that they have on that defense, and I think that Jeff Hafley is going to bring the best out of that unit. And if they would have had a good defense last year, especially when they made that late run, late last year into the postseason, they potentially could have been in the Super Bowl. With Jordan Love, if he's able to pick up from where he left off at the end of last season, this is a really damn good team that the Green Bay Packers have coming into this year. They have a lot of youth. They are really good up front. Tons of depth. You had Josh Jacobs, who should be an upgrade over Aaron Jones, who pretty much is like glass. You just breathe on him and he gets injured. I just love the Green Bay Packers this year. But I got the Detroit Lions taking the North again this year. Even though they do have the same record, I believe that in the division, the Detroit Lions are going to be a tad bit better. The Lions pretty much have everybody from last year back. You didn't lose your offensive coordinator. You keep your staff intact. This should be a team that should be able to get back to that NFC Conference Championship game. Offensive line is great. Receivers are pretty decent, even though I don't know about Jameson Williams. This is his make-or-break year. But outside of that, there aren't too many questions with the Detroit Lions. Their defense was really bad last year, but they did improve that. And I think for Detroit, I could see you winning the North again this year. And moving on to the final division, we got the NFC South, pretty much the worst division in the NFL still for a 3rd straight year. I got the Saints at 6-11. I just don't see it with Dennis Allen. I thought he was very fortunate to get to 9 wins last year. That's the most wins that he's ever had in his coaching career. They got some concerns on the offensive line. Derek Carr is mid and regressing. They hired Clint Kubiak, and if he ends up proving to be a successful hire, similar to when Todd Bowles hired Dave Canales last year, the Saints could surprise people, and they definitely could be a playoff team. But offensively, they just have a lot of concerns, a lot of things to be iffy about. Even defensively, I don't know if that defense is going to be as good this year as what it was last year under Dennis Allen. I just don't like him as a head coach, man. I think he's going to go 6-11 and he gets fired at the end of this year. I got the Buccaneers also going 6-11. they have overachieved over the last couple of years under Todd Bowles, man. He barely made it to the playoffs with Tom Brady. And even last year, they barely got into the playoffs. The only reason they got in was because they got hot near the tail end of the season. They benefited off playing a really weak schedule. And even then, the Buccaneers, it's not like they're winning a lot of games. Todd Bowles, he's just barely scraping by. I think this is a year when the Buccaneers come back down to earth. Losing Dave Canales is going to be a really big loss for them, because when you look at the impact that Dave Canales has had everywhere he's been, he's elevated every single quarterback. I mean, Geno Smith had that resurrection season. Dave Canales was a big part of that. And you saw how Geno Smith kind of regressed a little bit after Dave Canales left. Now Dave Canales is with the Carolina Panthers, and you saw how good Baker Mayfield was last year. That was mainly because of Dave Canales in the system that he implemented, which played well to Baker Mayfield's strengths. With him being gone, I expect this entire team to just kind of regress a little bit, and I got them at 6 wins. Next up, I have the Atlanta Falcons going 9-8. The Falcons are locked in to be a sure thing to win the NFC South, but I don't really see them in that way. I do think that they are a playoff team, but with Raheem Morris, I still have some concerns about him. He's not a proven thing that, oh yeah, he's just going to be a significant upgrade over Arthur Smith. That defense does have some concerns, even though I do think that defense could overachieve, but they do have a lot of young guys that they're banking on who they drafted. And with Kirk Cousins, I have some concerns about how good he's going to be coming off that Achilles injury. So I got them going 9-8. And lastly, I got the Carolina Panthers winning the NFC South. This is the biggest sleeper team in the NFL, in my opinion. I'm not giving up on Bryce Young. King Bryce is about to arrive this year. Now that he has a better supporting cast, you got Dave Canales, who has been successful with every quarterback that he's worked with. At this point, you can pretty much call Dave Canales the quarterback whisperer. And I think he's going to be able to have the same impact on Bryce Young as what Mike McDaniel has had on Tua Tagovailoa down there in Miami. And their defense, when you look at it from a talent standpoint, yeah, there are a lot of guys that you don't know about, and it doesn't really look that good on paper, but Ejiro Evero is one of the better defensive coordinators in the league. He's really good when it comes to maximizing the players that he has to work with, and I don't think that defense is going to be any worse than a middle-of-the-pack defense, which I still think should be good enough to win a division that isn't really that good, especially when you're going to have an improved offense. So this is it for my NFL record predictions for the 2023, or not the 2023, but the 2024-2025 NFL season. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys are going to agree with these in the comment section down below. Now, or revealed it too soon. Now that I have my record predictions out the way, if you guys haven't seen those, go ahead and check those out, because now I'm about to give you guys my NFL playoff predictions for the 2024-2025 NFL season. Starting with the AFC, I got the New York Jets getting the 7th seed, going against the Los Angeles Chargers, who I have getting the 2nd seed because I have them winning the AFC West this year. Kansas City, I got them coming in at the 6th seed, going on the road to play the Houston Texans. The Baltimore Ravens are going to be the 5 seed, going on the road to play Buffalo, who has the 4th seed after winning the AFC East again. And when we move on to my NFC wildcard predictions, I got Seattle sneaking in. That's the 7th seed at 10-7. They're going to be playing the Philadelphia Eagles. The Los Angeles Rams and the Detroit Lions are going to be rematching again from the wildcard round of this past season. And I got Green Bay playing Carolina on the road, since I have Carolina boldly winning the NFC South this year. Now, moving on to my divisional round predictions, I got Houston playing the Los Angeles Chargers. The Ravens have to go on the road to play Joe. And Joe Burrow only has one playoff loss on his resume right now. When you play Joe Burrow, you better bring your A game because he's just as good as what Patrick Mahomes is in the postseason. He's the only active quarterback who has a playoff win against Patrick Mahomes. And these are going to be some really good matchups that could go either way. Some people may be like, JT, you're crazy if you think the Chargers are going to go that far. You're underestimating the impact of Jim Harbaugh. For the divisional round in the NFC, I got the Detroit Lions taking care of business against the LA Rams. Once again, they're going to be playing the Philadelphia Eagles. The Green Bay Packers, they move on after beating the Carolina Panthers, and they're going to be playing the San Francisco 49ers in a rematch of last year's divisional round game. And we saw how close that game was. If it wasn't for Jordan Love, making a young mistake at the end of that game, Green Bay possibly could have been in the Super Bowl potentially, or in the conference championship game. But they would have made it to the conference championship. I believe they would have won that thing. So I'm excited to see a rematch between these two squads. Now we move on to conference championship weekend. Who makes it to the conference championship games this year? In the AFC Championship, I got the Houston Texans hosting the Baltimore Ravens at home. This is a vastly improved Houston Texans team compared to the one that got destroyed and dismantled by Baltimore when they played in the playoffs last year. And I won't even say destroyed and dismantled because in the first half they did put up a pretty good fight, but in the second half the Ravens were just too talented. Well, the Houston Texans are just as good as what the Baltimore Ravens are. Plus, you're going to have CJ Stroud, who I believe should win MVP this year, with how much talent they have to work with at receiver and capable of how good that defense is going to be. There's going to be a really tough outing for Baltimore, man. And the NFC Championship, we got the Eagles taking on the Green Bay Packers. And with the Super Bowl 59, I think we're going to see the Houston Texans versus the Green Bay Packers. This is my Super Bowl pick. A lot of people probably don't see the Super Bowl coming because you don't really think that the Texans and the Green Bay Packers are going to make that jump. But too many people are stuck in the recency bias. They're either picking the 49ers or the Lions to make it out of the NFC. You're either picking Kansas City or Houston. Well, you're either picking Kansas City or the Ravens to make it out of the AFC. I think that we're going to have a Super Bowl that nobody really sees coming. You got two ascending young quarterbacks in CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, which if they both make it to the Super Bowl at this point, you have to assume that both of these guys are MVP finalists and they both played at an MVP level. And the team not going to take to win this game are the Green Bay Packers. On paper, Houston looks like the better team, but the better team doesn't always win the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl also comes down to coaching, who's better in late game situations. And I just trust the Green Bay Packers a little bit more with them having a more experienced head coach, a more experienced coaching staff than I do the Miko Ryans. So these are my NFL playoff predictions for the 2024-2025 NFL season. And these are my complete NFL predictions. I might end up changing these depending on how the preseason goes for certain teams, because last year I had to change my predictions because the Carolina Panthers were just so atrocious. I had no choice but to not pick them to win the division last year, but I'm picking them to win it this year. And just let me know, your predictions down in the comment section down below. I know a lot of you guys are going to disagree with these, and I don't really care if you disagree. My only thing is that if you're going to disagree, don't say, oh, JT, you're a dumbass. You don't do no research. You don't know what you're talking about. If you disagree, explain to me why you believe I'm wrong and give your counter argument so we can have a good discussion in the comment section. I can't have a good debate with you if your only argument is you don't know shit about football. Tell me why you disagree with my prediction so we can have a good conversation. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I plan on going live again tomorrow, but it just depends on how far along I get with making the graphics for my SEC record predictions. That's what we're going to be doing next. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're listening on X. follow, retweet the stream. If you're listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we upload new content and when we go live. Remember that we aren't just a YouTube channel. Wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the audio version of this episode and all of our previous ones in audio format on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Give us a 5-star review if you enjoy. If you have a question that you would like answered on a future episode, you can send them in the DMs, NFL, college football on Instagram at JT_Sports on X at JT_Sports__. I appreciate you guys for